If they can't stop it there, they'll never stop it here. I guess that's the overriding idea that the Florida Maquis has been trying to sound the warning bell about. This issue with Ebola in Africa, a place where things don't travel as fast as they do here in North America. The average person has access to a vehicle in North America that can drive 500, 800, 1,000 miles, literally within a couple of days. Here, that's just not done. And for the last 2 years, they have been trying to stop this, and they have had zero success. They've recently decided to declare it a public health emergency of international concern, PHEIC is what they call it, which is going to throw a little bit more money at it. But once again, when they put out misinformation attempting to calm the public, it just exacerbates the problem. And you can read it in the articles. What they say about it doesn't match what's happening. If you can only get it from contact with a corpse or contact with bodily fluids of someone who is currently infectious, you would not see the infection rates that you're seeing. It wouldn't happen. And finally, other outlets, 2 months later, are starting to pick this up. This channel kind of benefited from the National Geographic special 2 months ago that was just very, I guess, fortuitously timed when this first started breaking. But now that that's all over with, anybody who talks about this in North America is seen as a crazy person. But here's another article confirming how the reality doesn't match what they're reporting. Here's an article from The Guardian that says, "Are motorcycle taxis making the Ebola crisis worse?" And what they're talking about is people who are infected, don't know they're infected, hiring these motorcycle guys to take them here and there and all this. And then the motorcycle guys themselves are getting infected. How could that possibly be? I mean, I've had a motorcycle before, and I've had people on the back, and I'm pretty sure that during at least the motorcycle ride, we weren't sharing any bodily fluids. And this is from Time. Watching a crisis become a catastrophe. Described as, imagine a firefighter battling a blaze while the sprinkler system emits gasoline. This is the current state of the Ebola outbreak in the DRC. A fire with gasoline being sprayed on it. And the point is this. They haven't admitted it's here, but if it is, they promise you they don't have a plan to stop it. So the reason I'm speaking about it is there are ways to mitigate it. And I'm going to go over some of those again today. Because talking to a US audience, just saying, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, the whole Chicken Little thing, even if it's the case, what can we do about it? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. Avoid like the plague. If this gets here, it's going to end up initially, I promise you, in the homeless population first. Since we're not sending doctors over there anymore, we're not sending nurses over there anymore, my first choice in that case would have been some type of a healthcare facility, but it's going to be in the homeless population, and the places that they frequent are going to be the places where you're going to pick this up. This is where you should avoid. If it's at all possible, if you see open 24 hours, find someplace else. Your mailbox. Paper is just an organic transport material. That's all it is. And who knows who has touched what, when, and what other male your male has touched, when you add in just sweat and moisture into the paper, it's a perfect breeding ground. Perfect breeding ground for garbage and crap of any kind of virus. Produce. Wash your produce, wash your produce, wash your produce. A lot of other good reasons to do it, but this is a much better one. And even if you have to, let me see if I can. This stuff is much, much better than the average hand sanitizer. And believe me, if you've ever been exposed to Decide, I ordered some of this stuff and got it and opened it up, and just opening up the container the smell will knock you back. It's powerful. It's potent. I totally believe it would kill anything. It's a mixture of alcohol and, I believe, vinegar. And it's, believe me, ammonia. Alcohol and ammonia. And it really is so much better than your average Germ-X or hand sanitizer. If you have stuff like apples, run it over this stuff and then wash the apple to get the stuff off. If you're using gloves to protect yourself, make sure you're taking the gloves off the right way so that you're not contaminating your hands in the process. And have this stuff, handy in case you think, oh, maybe I did touch this or maybe I did touch that. Because it is a virus and it can be killed with many things. Now, the reason I had this picture up was because when you're shopping, not that the stuff in the frozen food section is incredibly healthy for you anyway, but it's one more step. It's one more thing you have to touch in the store. That door. And believe it or not, there are a great many homeless people in this country that have jobs. And one of the easiest jobs to get is stock person. And that would be a great way to have someone who may have been exposed to someone who is infected transmit this into the general public. Not intentionally, no malice intended. The one thing about this that a lot of people don't understand, they think that when they think of Ebola and they think of the movies where this person is just horribly, horribly, horribly sick and, has boils and all sorts of stuff over their body, and then they collapse and die and turn into this puddle of goo in 48 hours. Not the case. Not the case. It starts out a lot like the common cold. You can be exposed to it, and you might not even show symptoms for up to 21 days. There have been people who've been exposed to it, have lived through it, still harboring the virus in their body, and have transmitted the virus onto people because they're harboring it, they have the antibodies to it, they're not affected by it, but they transmit it to somebody who's never been exposed, and then that person gets sick and dies. That's happened. That's fact. We've covered that. USA Today article about a woman in Liberia who infected someone a year after recovering from Ebola. It starts out a lot like the common cold. It looks like any other kind of cold. And with the plethora of other things that are going around, unless healthcare providers in this country are specifically attempting to test for Ebola, they'll never find it. And there is no rule that says you can't have the flu and Ebola at the same time. You can't have dengue and Ebola at the same time. You can't have some other communicable disease and Ebola at the same time. Those other things, those other less innocuous things, they're more than likely going to test for first, and when they get their positive response for those other things, they're going to stop looking. That's how this is going to get into this country and transmit. And by the time it gets to somebody where all they have is the Ebola virus, and the authorities are flummoxed and they finally test for it, it's going to be too late. That's the problem. If somebody asks you, why are you so worried about Ebola? Explain this concept to them. that it looks a lot like the cold. It starts a lot like the cold. The person actually might have just the flu as well, but they might also have been exposed to this virus. And once they transmit it, you're not going to be dead in 48 hours. I mean, you might be. It just depends on the state of your immune system. It's different with each person. They'll tell you that too. Some people, believe it or not, are immune. They can be exposed all day long. There were people that were immune to the Black Plague. That's how Europe survived. They contracted it and they got a little bit sick and they recovered. And those people, ironically, ended up being some of the most wealthy people in Europe because they were immune at the time. Those who could deal with the bodies usually helped themselves to the wealth of the people that they were burying. And over time, they became landowners and had vast access to resources. Some of them were seen as touched by God or blessed by God. Maybe so. Maybe that was God's gift to them. Who knows? That's good. They're going to be the same thing here. But that doesn't mean we don't take precautions. So this is why I've started to talk about this. Tried to get ahead of it. Tried to warn my friends and neighbors to not just assume that every little case of the sniffles is just something that you can deal with NyQuil and a couple days in bed. And I guess I will leave it there because there's really not much more to be said other than the fact that if it gets here, don't count on the government to even, especially this government, to even know about it or to even care to tell you that it's here. They may not want to know, so they may not look to find the information. And because they control the media, they can cook up 1,000 excuses why it wasn't really their fault and there's no real way to know about things like this, and blame the border and blame these terrible policies and lack of enforcement, blah, blah, blah. Blame, they will always point the finger, but they're still going to demand their taxes, aren't they? They're still going to demand that you pay them hand over fist and use that excuse, well, you need all of these services that they're not providing. We spent trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars on defense. Doesn't protect us, does it? Try not paying your taxes, though, and see what happens. But another subject for another day. Thank you, everyone, so much for the support. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.